Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, and it's a Photography 101 episode that asks the question, what brand should I buy when I'm buying my first DSLR? And a couple of side notes, if you're just looking for an awesome camera, with a bigger sensor and more features than, let's say, your cell phone, a great place to look is not a DSLR. Look at a hybrid camera or a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera. That means that's the same thing. And these are cameras like the Olympus Pen series or the Sony NEX series, and there's a variety of other ones that are out there that are really awesome, powerful cameras. They're smaller, they're lighter, they fit more in a bag, easier in a bag, and they take great pictures. But if you're thinking about photography as a hobby, you're probably thinking about getting a DSLR. And why is that? Well, that's because a DSLR is going to give you the greatest flexibility and the greatest amount of choices when you take photographs. So this is going to be the best choice if I want to examine all types of photography, like taking pictures of small objects, macro photography, or doing portraits, or doing event photography like weddings or meetings or whatever, or doing brochure photography or architectural photography or landscape photography, or you're going to get the most using a DSLR because it has the greatest range of controls and the greatest range of accessories. Now this particular camera, it's been out on my desk for about 2 weeks, because about 2 weeks ago I was doing I put this in quotation marks, professional portraits. I put that always in quotation marks because I'm an amateur photographer who sometimes does professional work. So I don't feel I have the right to call myself a professional, and I don't want to offend any professionals. But anyway, so this is a Nikon D600, and it's an upper level camera for the enthusiast, and it really could be very well used by a professional photographer. This has a very, very large sensor in it it's a full frame camera, and its sensor is roughly the same size as a piece of 35mm film. However, most people that are starting in DSLR photography are going to choose a camera with a slightly smaller sensor, also a very large sensor, but not quite as big. And that sensor size is called an APS-C type sensor. So it's a little bit smaller, which means that it probably has a little less dynamic range and a little less low light capability, but still it's going to be awesome, and it's going to let you do all these different things. So there are 4 major brands that sell APS-C size DSLR cameras in the US and probably worldwide, I'm guessing. And those 4 brands are Nikon, Canon, Pentax, and Sony. Now, some people might argue that the Sony camera is not really a DSLR, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to say that it is. So how do you pick between all these different cameras? Well, the good news is they are all excellent cameras. So you get a mid-range Sony or a mid-range Nikon or Canon or any of them. They're all really excellent cameras. But just like anything else, you might have a personal preference. And what would that be? Well, maybe just the way that the camera feels in your hands, or the position of the buttons, or the way the menus are structured. So if you look at a camera, they're all a little bit different. They're a little bit different fingerprint on them. And a lot of times people will say, I love my Canon because, and it's usually the way it feels in their hand, or where they can get at the buttons, or those sorts of things. Or the same thing with Nikon or Sony or with Pentax. So what's very important for you to do as a new photographer is to go to a place where you can actually look at these cameras, hold them in your hand, ask someone about them, and also look at the way that the menus are structured. So a lot of times to change functions in the camera, you have to look at the menus, and they're different in each camera. Personally, I think Pentax has the best menus, better than even the Nikons, which is what I tend to use, the Nikons. But I like the way that Nikons feel. Just personal preference. So once you know what type of camera you like, then it's an easy decision just to buy that camera. And because they're all so good, you're going to be pretty lucky. Now, why is it important to think about the future? Because If you're a hobbyist, you're going to go beyond that camera and the simple kit lens that came with it. And you're going to start to buy things like macro lenses or telephoto lenses or speed lights or other things that are very specific to that brand of camera. So here I have, as an example, here we have a nice lens. This is a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 Nikkor lens. And this lens costs more than this camera. So lenses can be very expensive, but the awesome thing about this lens is that I can use this on this camera, I can use it on my D90, I could use it on my D3000, I could use it on a future camera that I buy that's a Nikon camera. It's going to work on all of them. So when you start buying accessories, what you really do is you expand your range of abilities when it comes to photographing things, and typically most accessories are specific to the brand of camera. So you want to start out with a brand that you're comfortable with, not so much because you're going to have that camera for the rest of your life, but because you're going to change over time. And if you build up these speed lights and lenses and other things, they're going to ride right along with you, and you're not going to have to repurchase those sometimes very expensive items. So with that, I'd like to say happy camera shopping. And if you get some time, please give my audio podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. You can find it on iTunes and other pod-catching sites. And have a really wonderful day.